Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part two of my conversation with Nathan Carpenter from Oberlin College. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
You are about to hear part two of our conversation with Nathan Carpenter from Oberlin College. Please be sure to listen to our previous episode to hear part one of this conversation.
It's fascinating. One previous guest, Joe Tranquillo from Bucknell University, they are going through a similar type of curriculum sort of renaissance. I feel, that, he too was talking about, this idea of um, of of having students be aware of the environment, being aware of building relationship with other people,
Mhm.
being able to sort of make these kind of decisions for themselves, and build empathy and all of this stuff. And I really love the way that um, sort of curriculum design is going. Um, I sort of wonder, how many programs and how many institutions are thinking about stuff like this, because they really ought to be looking at programs like Oberlin's, or like I just said, Bucknell's, um, as you are introducing sort of this, how do you become a purposeful, mission filled um, person, um, sort of and make sure that they get that at the right time, so that you don't only think about it when you are trying to look for a job.
Mhm.
um, you know um, what a wonderful thing to think about. And he and Joe and I talked a little bit about being sort of almost like the core values that you instill into the student with the students. And then you know and hopefully, because the core value exists, then everything that they do, all the decisions that they make, are impacted by those core
Mhm.
values.
Exactly. And this is where just to return to the portfolio piece a little bit, this has been where our partnership
Right.
with Digication has really enriched these programs in a lot of ways because what we are um doing in these portfolios that students are building as part of these programs is really helping to draw those connections between the theory and the practice,
Mhm.
um, and to be able to identify and articulate a problem, and then also identify and articulate a story about why you are so passionate about that issue or about an experience you had of attempting to address that issue, and having all that live in the same place right next to each other in a way that
Mhm.
can be shared and archived and built upon, is just so incredibly powerful. And it in thinking about our programming here at Oberlin and PAL and SOAR and into programs for juniors and seniors, it's our goal in thinking about that curriculum as well, that things really build into one another.
Mhm.
So much of the kind of foundation we use in a program like SOAR is built upon what students did in their first year in their
Yeah.
PAL cohorts, in having conversations about how do you look at a course catalog of hundreds and hundreds of courses and think about
Right.
what are the four that I'm going to take this
Right.
first semester, and what's the rationale that I can articulate for that choice. That's where it begins, and then we build into these conversations you're talking about, into thinking about, okay, what's what's an issue, something that is really complex out in the world that I want to solve, and how can my role in addressing that live at the intersection of what I've done in the classroom as well
Mhm.
as what I've done outside the classroom, and how can I make the most of all these incredible experiences that students have at Oberlin,
Mhm.
and really leverage them in support of what you're saying, in support of this real passion for making the world a better place. um, and again, those are connections that have always existed in those programs, and are drawn out so cleanly and clearly by
Yeah.
um, adding this additional practice, and this tool
Right.
of keeping that reflection and that planning and that action, all recorded and archived and displayed on these portfolios.
Yeah. Well, it's like integrative learning, but you're also integrating the whole sort of, you know, mission and purpose and all of that into the integrative learning part.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the times, I think that in the past, a lot of integrative learning happens, or at least in academic settings, it feels like that, oh, if in my math class you can use that example of what's going on in the real world, and going to the finance class, and then this that, you've
Hmm.
made connections. And I think
Hmm.
those connections are good, but I think the connections that you're making is just, it operates in a slightly different spectrum, because it's non-academic. It's almost about sort of the development of a brain. Your students are under 26, most of them, I think, and
Hmm.
they're still sort of developing, but they are also forming an idea of the world and creating values for themselves. And those are things that are, I would argue, a little less academic, but you're integrating that piece, which is what's so powerful.
Yeah, and if I could just add too, to take off the peer advising hat and the Pal SOAR hat, and thinking more within my strategic initiatives role. One of the things that is happening, one of the curricular innovations that's happening at Oberlin right now, which is really exciting, is we've launched recently several new integrative concentrations, which
Mhm.
accomplish exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about, where
Right.
in order to for students pursuing an integrative concentration, they take a certain number of academic courses, and are also required to pursue an experience. So, an internship, a research experience, a community engaged project
Mhm.
that aligns with the content of the integrative concentration, and aligns with what they're thinking about in the classroom, and gives them a chance to really put that
Yeah.
theory into practice.
Mhm.
And then they document all of that on a portfolio, and talk about, really explicitly, here's how I took a concept from my public health course, and applied it in my internship experience, or in
Mhm.
the lab when working with
Yeah.
a faculty member here. um, and so it is just, it's such it's just really an exciting time for that kind of,
Yeah.
as you're saying, integrative learning, and it's really exciting to see so much of that happening at Oberlin.
Yeah. Now, how do you keep your students engaged? I mean, I noticed that when I was, work talking to your students, they just seem really incredibly engaged. There's
Hmm.
like a natural sort of a genuine interest in the subject matters, and I I know that sometimes, it's not something you can take for granted, at all colleges and all places. Um, and I happen to think that students are naturally engaged, but then usually what happens is that we lose them. Um, how do you how did you not lose them and sort of
Hmm.
keep that engagement level like that?
Yeah, well, I think the first, I agree with you that first level is just being so fortunate to have awesome students who are really serious about their learning, but also like to have fun and bring their whole authentic selves to what they do. Is so a lot of this I can't take credit for. A lot of this is just the privilege of working with awesome students. um, I think what I maintain a focus on at all times is is really thinking about what is the need that's being met by a particular program, and ensuring that there's an alignment, that as we're building programs and designing curriculum, that we're always having in mind um, the goals and the outcomes and what we want students to learn or achieve, and ensuring that that's in alignment with you know either what they also are thinking that they need to learn or achieve, or if there is a moment where maybe we need to redirect them and say, no, this is actually a really important thing to be thinking about at this particular point in your journey at Oberlin, that we are really just upfront and transparent. And I think that at Oberlin, as I imagine elsewhere as well, students respond really well to that. And the other piece too, which is particular to the programs I work with the peer advising piece,
Mhm.
is that it's just fun. Like it's really awesome to observe peer mentors and pals in action. And we are fortunate to have a real, I call it or many folks here call it, we have this ethos of OBs helping OBs. And that really rings true in these programs. And
Yeah.
we have such a culture of older students giving back, who received support when they were first and second years, then turning around and giving that same support back.
Yeah.
And it really is just this culture and this ethos that we have on campus.
I gotta say that the students being student mentors. I don't know if how many of them do it for this purpose. I mean, I think many of them probably are thinking about like it's a great way to give back because that's happened. They've benefited from it before, but that experience itself is also an incredible experience to learn to be a leader, to learn to
Hmm.
model, to learn to do all of that. And so it's like the whole you know like you give but you actually receive just as
Hmm.
much, sometimes more. So that's really, I think it's really wonderful that you have this opportunity for all of them. Have you ever thought about, um sometimes I think about this and it overwhelms me when I think about it, but have you ever thought about, you over the next few years you're going to have thousands of students have gone through this program and they're all going to start to do incredible things. They're all going to have very storied meandering river journeys,
Hmm.
and then they'll have, um, they'll be unique. No, none of them will be alike, but they will overlap and they will collaborate hopefully a little bit and inspire each other. But at the end of the day, to me, having all these incredible journeys and stories in a recorded format, in a in this place, it feels like to me that we've never had that before as a society, to have careful. I mean, look, these portfolios are not. It's not like just it's not like a few Facebook posts or
Hmm.
social share where you can sort of do it real quick. They are thoughtful. They take work. They take a lot of effort. And I
Hmm.
wouldn't even be surprised if some students, while doing it, are like, oh, this I have to do this.
Hmm.
But but it's something that they push themselves, or kind of like an athlete, you push themselves and you get the results. But I almost feel like that at scale we would not have seen this kind of integrative um, sort of approach to a lot of successes that are all documented in a place with hopefully some pretty rich media, even,
Hmm.
maybe even some videos. And I know some of your students were doing that.
Hmm.
Have you ever thought about that? That's sort of like almost like a it's almost like a resource that we've never had before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. I don't know if I have thought about it in those terms, but it makes me think of so many things because you're absolutely right. We have had students make these incredibly rich portfolios, multimedia, and not just the media itself, but also really thoughtful reflection about the curatorial choices about what's been included and where it's been included on the portfolio. And I think that um, one of the new frontiers probably at all levels of education, including higher ed, is going to be thinking about how communication can happen in a truly constructive way in a digital space, and communication and collaboration, I would say. And I think there's a lot of exciting work being done in a lot of places on that front. And I think we also are seeing in lots of different ways the kind of destructive end of that spectrum, and how communication in digital spaces can not be so great and cannot move us towards um, uh, productive collaboration. But I do think that there's a way that digital collaboration, in thinking about whatever the future will look like. I mean, and this maybe is a dramatic statement, but there's a certain element to which it can function as that public square, which is so um, foundational to democracy, even, and democratic processes. And so you know I I don't want to say necessarily that digital portfolios will solve all what ails the republic, but listening to you say that, I think that's a piece of what is really exciting to me about this kind of integrative learning, and especially about seeing that integrative learning happening digitally and happening collaboratively,
Mhm,
because I think those are skills that, as a society, and as a country, we desperately need. And it very well could be these students and this kind of um, collaboration and effective use of digital space that they're modeling that can guide maybe where next steps could take us.
mhm. No, I think that you're right, and that's one thing that I just got out of that is the um it's how unique that they all are, but it comes with collaboration in addition to that, so it just make everything exponentially more complex.
Hmm.
But it
Hmm.
it gives it gives a it's sort of it's almost like, like when we hear about amazing stories about someone's success, and we can idolize them, we can, or some people vilify them, some people criticize them. um but when all these different stories, and we're talking thousands and thousands of them doing that,
Hmm.
and they are um interesting and hopefully beautiful and productive in all their own ways. Um, you start to be able to draw patterns. You start to be able to appreciate, like you were saying, democracy and sort of the celebration of diversity, like a truly diverse kind of river journeys of everyone. Um, think that's really quite a, I don't know, it's quite a beautiful scene. I still don't know what will come out of it, you know, but it overwhelms me to even just think about it,
Hmm.
because we never had that resource before.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And I think it can, you know, I I share your sense of not knowing exactly what it will look like. But I think that whatever lessons are learned can be applied, in so many other spaces as well. I'm somebody who, for example, I don't think that social media is bad. I think social media can actually be an incredibly powerful tool. But what we need to think about is how do we use it? Because it's here and can be used for good, I think, in so many ways. But I don't know if as a whole we've quite got our finger on that
The
balance yet.
scales slightly tipped, you know. Well, I will say that I agree with you, and but I would say that right now we have a, one of the pieces to the puzzle is that the scale itself, not
Hmm.
the people that are being put on the scale, but the scale itself has, a certain bias, towards, you know, what creates the most amount of clicks, because that creates the most amount of benefits financially for a private, enterprise.
Hmm.
um, and that's probably what, sort of a an incentive for a tipped scale without the individuals using it, uh, almost like a little bit of a loss, is a lost battle before you start, because it's
Hmm.
tipped, or things that you put in there gets further, used almost divisively, so that, it's you could have been just making a statement, but it gets put into a grouped into a context where it's used to further sort of, divide up, sort of, the, the societal, ideas, whether they're good or bad. But just by having those kind of extremes is what seems to be benefiting, some of the platforms themselves. I think that's where I worry about more. But at the same time, but what that really means is that people from Oberlin, or people who go through, the type of, experience that you are giving them, um, are the ones hopefully will spot that and help fix it, right?
Hmm. That's the hope.
Yeah,
That's the hope for sure.
that's yeah, yeah. Although, I mean, um, there's no doubt that I think that, you know, uh, a lot of I think that a lot of good has come out of, social media as well. Um,
Hmm.
I just wish that, we lean heavier on the good side,
Yeah.
don't you?
Ab- Absolutely. And
Yeah,
it's just yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that I think about a lot and
yeah,
don't necessarily arrive at any answers around, but just thinking about the incredible
mhm,
power of the idea that we can all be connected to each other instantaneously, like you and me
yeah,
right now through this screen,
yeah, yeah,
which is just amazing.
it is.
And how can we be setting ourselves up and to really just harness the power of that in ways that make the world better, that make our communities more inclusive, and move towards the um, uh, a future where these challenges that we're seeing are being addressed.
So, um, to we are almost out of time, but to wrap up, um, you want to tell us a little bit about any any future plans for any of your programs, PAL, SOAR, or others
Mhm.
that you are thinking about, like new ideas that you're gonna try out next? Seems like you're rebuilding something every year.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, certainly we will, as always, continue to uh, evaluate how best these programs can be positioned to support students. I think we're at a model for both that is working really well, and that we're getting really awesome feedback from students around. Um, and one of the exciting pieces for me, especially with thinking about the portfolio integration with these um, programs is uh, because our partnership with Digication is in the last couple of years, as you mentioned, we're getting to the point where uh, students will have moved through using portfolios a- for each of these programs. And so, kind of the exciting curricular frontier in a lot of ways is how can we directly build on within that digital space, within the portfolios that, for example, that first years are building through PAL to share with their academic advisor about their kind of academic goals and interests. How can that same portfolio then serve as the jumping off point for what they're doing their sophomore year in SOAR, and what they're doing their junior year when they participate in the junior practicum, which is a program that we didn't even talk about, that comes out of our career development center.
Mhm,
um, and how can we really clearly draw those connections is something that we are already doing, and are excited to continue to build on. But yeah, and beyond that, I think that there was both PAL and SOAR in that first COVID year, in the 2020-21 year, was entirely on Zoom,
mhm,
and was really rewarding, and the students were as awesome as ever. And the joy of returning to doing that in person this year, and getting to see everybody, and be in the same space again. um, there's just been so much momentum and joy coming out of that, and that's another piece that I'm so excited to be back to that, and to build on that momentum, while, as I mentioned earlier, incorporating those really awesome pieces of what we innovated out of necessity during that COVID year.
mhm. You know, out of the all these mentions of COVID, what I love about talking to you is that you also talked a lot about joy and how
Mm,
that in and of itself is something that um, that you celebrate, but you also see in your students and how they help each other and sort of this culture of joy. And I think that it's sometimes perhaps even a little bit underused in our
mm,
world. Joy is very much one of the things that we should all strive for, and it should be a big part of what our program looks like. It should be one of our core values is to deliver that,
mhm,
and so I can hear that in you, and I feel more joy having talked to you today.
well, thank you, Jeff, and me as well. This has been a really awesome chance to just think and talk, and I always appreciate our opportunities to connect.
All right. Well, Nathan, thank you again for being a Digication scholar and coming onto this podcast. And I hope that we get to do this again soon, and I can't wait to see what you come up with next. It's very very exciting for me to see, and I think that, well, in a few years' time, we will get to see what it means when you have thousands of these portfolios, each having these incredible stories in them, and I
Hmm.
hope that maybe one of your students will figure out what to do with it.
Absolutely. I'm sure they would come on here and have even better things to say than me.
All right. Hey, thank you, Nathan, and take care. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative ePortfolio programs in K through 12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Drew Albanesius and Jeff Yan. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching.